All right, so this is the stages of genocide lecture, I guess. It's not ideal to do this over screencast, but I'm going to do the best that I can. So, genocide as a term was not actually created or coined until 1944. Obviously, given the timeline, that means that it was coined in response to what happened in World War II with Germany and the Holocaust. It was coined by a Polish lawyer named Raphael Lemkin. Um, it comes from the Greek prefix genos, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin suffix side, meaning to kill or killing. So that's like homicide, suicide, regicide. So genocide is the killing of an entire race or tribe. It was developed largely in response to, like I said, the systemic murder of Jewish people during the Shoah, which is the Jewish or the word they use for the Holocaust, but also in response to previous instances of genocide in Armenia that went unpunished. And we're going to talk about Armenia in a second. Genocide was first recognized as an actual crime under international law in 1946 by the UN, the United Nations, and it is defined as the means, I'm sorry, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent future generations. So taking children away from their parents or forcibly sterilizing the group. And when I say the group, I'm referring to the targeted group. There have been, I want to say, it's on my slides, but 7 or 8 defined genocides in modern times. And that starts, unfortunately, in 1862 with the Minnesota genocide of the Dakota people. This was basically characterized by the mass execution of 38 Dakota warriors in Mankato, but there were also government decrees calling for the skin of any Dakota person, and women and children were put on essentially a death march. So that has been officially recognized as a genocide. From 1915 to 1920, we had the Armenian genocide. Armenia is in Eastern Europe, near Turkey. And during that genocide, 1.2 million Armenians, which is about 2/3 of the Armenian population, were massacred. And that was just in the year 1915. The interesting and horrible part about this one is that it was not officially recognized by the U.S. government until last year. And Turkey, even though we have actual physical evidence of mass graves and of what happened, Turkey still won't admit to perpetrating the genocide and still hold that the Armenians overinflated the number of people who died. From 1932 to 1933, there was the Ukrainian Holodomor, and this was the Russian-induced famine in Ukraine. This one is vastly under-taught. Not a lot of people know about this one in history, but it is one of the higher death counts. 3.9 million victims died predominantly of starvation. And that starvation was induced by the Russian forces who cut off all food supply or stole all food supply from Ukrainian farmers. The one that everyone pretty much associates with the term genocide is 1939-1945, the Nazi Holocaust in Europe. The number of European Jews exterminated is still a range because we're never going to know the exact number. Um, but approximately 8 to 10 million European Jews were exterminated. That's about a third of the Jewish population in Europe, all of Europe. And that's just one demographic that was targeted during that time period. And that's the genocide we'll be predominantly focusing on in this unit. 1975 to 1979 was the Cambodian genocide by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge regime. This was 1.7 million Cambodian, predominantly Hmong casualties. And by 1979, that population was almost extinct. This is a large reason for the high Hmong refugee population that we have in St. Paul. And this was the attempt to wipe out an entire ethnic group using extremist communism, essentially. One of the bigger things in this genocide was the targeting of intellectuals. And glasses were seen as a sign of intellectualism, which means that people were targeted who wore glasses. So glasses are still triggering for survivors of that regime. So 1991, 1995, and this is coming within my lifetime. So I was 3 in 1991. But that was when there was the genocide of Bosnian and Croatian Muslims in the former Yugoslavia. In 1991, Bosnia and Croatia declared independence from Yugoslavia. And when the international community acknowledged that independence, there was a targeted attack on the ethnicity of Bosniak Muslims and Croatians. What's interesting about this genocide is a lot of the casualty was sniper fire, and they were locked down and ruled predominantly through fear. The second, probably most well-known genocide is the 1994 Rwandan genocide. This one lasted only 100 days, which is why it's so horrific. Within those 100 days, almost 1 million civilian, predominantly Tutsi deaths happened at the hand of the Hutu government and what's known as the Interahamwe. We're going to look at that one a little bit later, but this genocide actually opened up the door for what is debated as a genocide through my study and my reading and my understanding. To me, this fits all the criteria of a genocide, but naming it that is accusing Rwanda of perpetrating genocide, and I don't know that the international community is ready to do that. But basically, this was the genocide of Hutu refugees and Congolese Hutus in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was committed in the name of Rwandan national security. And though the number is never probably going to be fully known, there's over 200,000 deaths within those 2 years. Almost done, guys. I know this is not super exciting or not super uplifting content. And then the last two are actually ongoing genocides, and that is a new phenomenon. Darfur was the first time that they named a genocide before the end while it was still ongoing. Darfur began in 2003. The Sudanese-backed militia, the Janjaweed, they put the Darfur region of Sudan into mass famine. This is one of the, if not the worst famine in modern history. And it's pretty horrific. And then the most recent, and this was actually, it's in the process of being declared a genocide through the UN, But in 2017, Myanmar, or Burma, as some people know it, began the ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims. And it was a government perpetrated genocide. And to date, in the last 2.5 years or so, there have been over 25,000 deaths, predominantly happening in displaced persons camps or refugee camps.